So welcome and thank you again for coming. My name is Grant King. I'm the Director of Comprehensive Planning and Housing at Serpent. We'll talk a little bit more about why Serpent is here in a little bit, but just wanted to take a second and welcome you to the third public workshop in support of the Norton Master Plan process. I also wanted to acknowledge, I don't know if everyone made it, but I know that when we looked at the registrants for tonight's meeting, there were several board, commission, and committee members from town, and I wanted to thank you for coming in particular and acknowledge you guys. I think the first time you speak tonight during the discussion, maybe you can take a moment and introduce yourselves and tell us what board you serve on, and we'll meet you that way. I also wanted to acknowledge some town staff members that are here. I know Jen Carlino, your conservation agent, is here. Sharon Rice, your Parks and Recreation coordinator, I think I saw her come in. And then Paul DiGiuseppe, your director of Planning and Economic Development. And I think Nicole Salvo, his assistant, is here as well. So thank you guys for coming. And then finally, some Serpent staff members are here. We have Bill Napolitano and Helen Zinkavage, who are our directors of the Environmental Planning Program. And then Sarah Brown and Lizeth Gonzalez are senior comprehensive planners here. Lizeth will give you a very brief presentation to discuss tonight's agenda and Serpent's role and kind of where we are in the process. But before she does that, I was hoping to just cover two main points to kind of structure tonight's conversation. And the first one is Norton has an incredible head start for open space and recreation and natural and cultural resource planning already. You have a stellar open space and recreation plan that Jen and her commission have put together. There's a municipal vulnerability preparedness planning in place. And there's also this excellent content that we heard when we last met in person. In fact, that was my last in-person public workshop before COVID hit. It was in the library in early March. Just a ton of excellent content to build on and to draw from as we make our master plan together. So that leads me to my second point. That frees us up for what I think Bill would call like a down-home, informal fireside chat tonight, right? All we're hoping to do is listen to you and ask a couple guiding questions and fill in any gaps that there may or may not be in that planning that I just mentioned. Just simply add value to and confirm areas of consensus and move forward that way with tonight. So with that, I'll pass it to Lizeth, who will give you a very brief presentation, and we'll start our discussion.
Sure. Thanks, Grant, for that welcome and those great points. So as Grant touched a little bit upon today, we're just going to go over some introductions, Serpent's role, and talk about where we're at with the Norton Master Plan, and then dive a little bit deeper into our topics for tonight, talking about previous planning efforts, and what that information might look like on the workshop page. And then we're going to break out into a group discussion like he mentioned. So what is Serpent? Who are we? And what's our role in all of this? So Serpent is the regional planning agency for Southeastern Mass, and we are here to assist and coordinate with our cities and towns. And in relation to the master plan specifically, we're here to really listen to you, understand your goals and priorities for Norton. We look at data, compile it, analyze it, and present it in a way that's easy to understand for everyone. And then all of that together, we write a plan that directly responds to those goals that you've pointed out and prioritized, and really charter a path to achieve those goals. The Norton Master Plan, getting back down to the basics, a master plan is a comprehensive analysis of all aspects of community development. And you can see those 9 elements at the bottom of the page there. And we've touched on the top row, really, so far. And today we're looking at natural and cultural resources, as well as open space and recreation. So part of the plan is really considering the community's physical growth and using that document to charter that path for the next 5 to 10 years. And because it is a document that focuses on public policy and decision making, it's a great way to check in with the community and really reassess those goals and priorities and say, are these still relevant? Do you really want these to move forward? And if so, how can we keep momentum going? And then looking at today and what we're really doing today, and this is part of the public participation and engagement that's so critical to completing a successful master plan. Your thoughts and the input that you give us really complements the data, really gives it color and fleshes out that information. And luckily with Norton, we started last fall, just around this time. Sarah actually reminded me today, and we had a chance to meet face to face and have some of those interactions in person. But today we're shifting to online participation because we can't go without it. And we're hoping this turns out to be into a meaningful conversation and discussion. So that leads me into today's topic, and that's open space, recreation, natural and cultural resources. I want to highlight the previous planning efforts regarding the open space and recreation plan, which was completed in 2017. And as Grant mentioned, it really sets a great baseline for the master plan. Here you'll see the 7 goals that were outlined, and they cover a lot of ground. And with those goals, there were also action items that we hope to implement into the master plan and ensure that they are really cohesive. The planning efforts are working together in achieving those goals. And then another plan I'd like to highlight relates to the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan. And that looks at the top hazards, which Norton, in an effort with Serpent as well, highlighted to be flooding, high wind, the impacts of extreme temperature, as well as changing seasonality, and then how those affect elements of Norton's natural environment. And that also includes infrastructure and resource disruptions. The Canoe River Aquifer is a huge resource in Norton, and that means that any disruptions related to those hazards could have great impact in the community. So some of the things that we want to think about. And then I want to take a look at some of the maps that we've put together regarding habitats. You'll see this is a great depiction of what that looks like in Norton, in addition to open space, whether it's in perpetuity, limited, or if there's a potential for change down the line. And then the priority protection areas that are highlighted in green on this map, identified as critical to maintaining their protected status. And then Norton's water resources, which are concentrated up at the top there. And then before I move on to the next slide, I want to take some time to, actually Grant wanted to take some time to look over the workshop page. So I'm going to hand it off to Grant.
I was hoping you would share great, awesome, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so I mean, just to reiterate, the master plan is going to build on those key data sets, those key interventions that the town has already identified, and we're sort of going to embrace that content and bring it into the master plan and find ways that it, as a community-wide comprehensive plan, can reinforce that planning. So I'm hoping that's clear to everyone here that we're going to build on your existing planning for these specific topic areas. And then, as Lizeth just said, I was hoping to show you that we have another 2 hours to talk tonight. But the workshop is going to go on for at least another 2 weeks, and that online sort of rolling participation process takes place at this page here. So Lizeth, if you don't mind scrolling down, that we have some frequently asked questions about master planning in general, why we're doing it, what the process is going to look like, who's involved, what the final document will be, how do we make sure that it doesn't just sit on a shelf and and collect dust? How does it actually lead to change? We sort of address those main points for you before you participate in these online activities. And then we've made three little activities for you to participate in. The first of which is a cultural inventory. Those are, sorry, I'm going a little quickly. Those are there's a nice little a way to access all of that content, and you can choose whether you're participating in one or all. The cultural inventory itself is simply, we took a tour of town, building from historic preservation documentation, from just knowledge of the community, and we've provided what we think is a decent assessment of places and businesses and historic locations in town. And we're asking you to say, hey, did we get this right? Are these features of Norton's physical and cultural life, are these important to you? And we also provide an opportunity for you to say, hey, you missed something really important, and to fill in a blank and help us see if we've missed anything. The second activity is a points of interest mapping exercise. And for those of you who attended the workshop at the library in March, this is just that sticker map where you can place a point on the map, and that point you can tag with a theme, whether it be agricultural preservation or habitats, or pick your own sort of fill in the blank comment. So that helps us better understand actual places in town that we may not be aware of as outsiders. So please take a moment to participate in that. That's very important. And it builds on when you're greeted with the map. It'll build on those points that we identified with you guys in March. And then finally, we have just a little word game, kind of a fill in the blank word game, where we're asking you to express your hope for Norton and for your community. And you simply help us complete 5 statements with any words that come to mind. So that probably take maybe 5 minutes to do. So those are the 3 ways, in addition to our conversation tonight, that we're hoping to just hear from you and have that very valuable input from the community and from the public. I think that's all I wanted to say about the webpage. Please circulate that link widely. I know Paul and Jen are working to get it on the town webpage. Please invite all of your friends and neighbors and community members to participate. It's very valuable input for us. So with that, I think, Lizeth, are we ready to start our conversation?
Yeah, I think so. I do want to just go over a little bit of protocol, so that way we get the most out of this experience. If you could mute yourself unless you're speaking, which we haven't had that issue, so that's been great. When you do want to speak, please use the raise your hand feature, which is that you click on the participants and then you can see the raise hand option there. And feel free to introduce yourself when you do speak. And if for some reason you don't want to raise your hand and you don't want to speak on camera, feel free to use the chat feature. We'll definitely be checking that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Bill and Helen.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I must admit, this is my favorite part of the master planning process. I think tonight, when you cover open space, recreation, cultural and natural resources, these are the heart and soul issues of a community. These are the things that often define a community's appearance, and it's also the way you most physically interact with your community. One of the things, too, especially in these times with the COVID crisis, we really need access to alternatives to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And nature and the outdoors really provide that outlet, that escape that we need. So the one thing about a master planning process is kind of alluded to, what Grant's alluded to and what Lizette's alluded to, is that we plan with you and not at you. That's one of my favorite phrases, because that's the only way you really can plan. If we're not planning with you, then we don't really have a plan. And a master plan affords you the opportunity to take a long-range look at things. A lot of times we're forced to make decisions hastily. Sometimes it's by rule of law, sometimes a town meeting, things like that. But when we get together and we look at the documents that we have that Grant alluded to, and that several of the town staff have worked very hard on. I worked with Jen on the open space plan, and I must say Jen, you still have probably the most comprehensive open space plan in the state, or definitely at least in our district. And it's always lent itself very well to go on to master planning. So to have this opportunity to work on a master plan with all of you is really special. So when we get into heart and soul issues, you know, the things we're looking at, the things that you have to keep in mind and things we want to hear from you is, what are the types of things that we would want to preserve in Norton? You know, it could be you have a wonderful habitat inventory for certain parts of town that Jen's undertaking with volunteers. And you talk about, you know, connected habitat, wildlife routes, the whole bit. Do we need to create more of these connections? Do we need to connect isolated areas? You know, do we want to provide new sports fields? Do we want to protect water resources? And a lot of people think, you know, is that just recreational water resources, fisheries, that? It could be land, and I don't know how deep you got into it with the land use discussion the last time, but land resources that are really important to water supply, and that could be your soils, your forest, you know, turf that is not bare, and other priorities that you have in your community. So that's my first question to everybody. What are the things, what are the priority areas that you have as citizens in Norton? What's important to you? And don't be shy. It's like a conversation. We're all just talking. It's like a big family chat.
Someone has to be brave and go first.
Oh, Jen's got her hand up. Okay.
I raised my little blue hand. I would definitely put our aquifer lands on that list. We certainly need to protect our water supply, and that includes looking at the soil maps and the stratified drift and high yield aquifer maps. Of course, I can go on all day about this, so I'm only going to say one thing, and then I'm going to mute and let other people talk.
Broke the ice.
What else we got?
I see in the chat, Denny Goodrich says, I'll jump in, rail trail. And good to see you, Bill. Denny, are you able to
Denny, hi.
talk with us?
I can now.
All right.
Good to see you, Bill.
You too, Denny, and I'm glad. The rail trail is definitely important. It's been out there for years, and you guys have been working so hard. That's another group in town. The Rails to Trails group's been working so hard. They've been so patient going through the process. Tell us a little bit about it, Denny. What do you want to do there?
Well, it's just, I think we need to do a little bit of a better job publicizing it, giving people more updates. I know it keeps on moving around on the tip and everything, but that's the opportunity that I see. I mean, you and I have been talking for years on this whole thing, the whole opportunity about, you know, safe places to bike with the kids and connecting all the habitats, especially off of Washington.
Yep.
A lot of stuff out there in the woods that nobody knows about, and the rail trail might be a connector from A to B to get people out there.
Great way to discover Norton.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Excellent. May I ask a follow-up question? So when you say do a better job publicizing and updating the public, do you have any specific improvements in mind that we could recommend through the town page or emails or?
Well, I think it's more so from the committee standpoint. I mean, it seems like it's always start, stop, only because of where the project keeps on moving around, you know, with year to year. Specifically, you know, when are we going to have, you know, start putting shovels into the ground? And I know the widening of 123 is kind of, Bill and I have talked about this over the years, is kind of dovetailed together with the engineering standpoint. I think us as a committee need to do a better job in terms of giving updates in terms of where we are, because we had a huge wave of interest when it first started.
Yeah.
And again, it just starts and stops and starts and stops.
All right.
Okay.
So I see Laura Parker in the chat said, I'd like to see a better, more defined usage plan for the Edith Reed property, please. Laura, would you be willing to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Ideally, I'd like to preserve it as a natural space while potentially finding some way to develop it and make it a potential revenue opportunity. Renting it out in some manner while still preserving it.
Jen Carlina, may I put you on the spot? Will you tell us a little bit more about, I think when we spoke in preparation for this meeting, there are some new paths back there. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that is the plan. We have to finish renovating the lodge first, and so that may be why I have to hop off the meeting to go to finance committee and try to get money for the ceiling.
All right, well, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to text me if they really need me. But yes, that is the plan. Camping, rental space for meetings, events for Conservation Commission, and guest speakers, the trail work. We have a grant through the Cultural Council. We're trying to get some sculpture on the property, and a whole bunch of other ideas. Yeah.
That's great. Even if it's just self-sustaining.
Yes.
In terms of revenue that comes in. Something that allows us to develop it and use it.
That is the plan.
Broader ways.
Try to generate some revenue from it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the EDC, if it matters.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And between Denny, Jen, and Laura, you've all brought up a great point. And one of the things that Bridgewater did years ago, some of you know I'm on the Taunton River Stewardship Council as well, the Wild and Scenic River Committee. And we do mini grants and things. And the town of Bridgewater had the same dilemma, trying to publicize the availability of its park space to try to get people down there to use them the whole bit. They were in the process of refurbishing, a lot like you're doing out at Edith Reed, Jen. And what they did is they worked with either the Conway School or Mass Audubon, I think was doing at the time, to put together a parks master plan for each one of the sites and said, what does it offer the public? What are the potential best uses? Who could partners be in the maintenance and upkeep of it, management of it? So it was really kind of a cool thing.
Excellent. I see Michael has his hand up, Michael Toole.
Hey, Michael Toole. I think one of the things that I always hear from people is the twofold. One is recreation space for youth sports. There seems to be, and everyone's kind of on their own now, and they kind of work with the schools to try to use those spaces. But when we work with, I was vice president of softball way back, and then you'd be going to some of these facilities that were town-based facilities, and you were like, wow, I wish Norton could have this, where it's, I think, and there's really a desire to kind of have some of those and kind of pulling them all together. I think those are one of the things. And for my own personal thing, if you've ever been to Hopkinton State Park, they have used that the lake right within there for the recreational use, and I think I would love to see the reservoir converted to something where there are not just tours of kayaks, but just people go there and rent them, go out on there, not less motorized, but more sailboats, paddleboards, those kinds of things.
Cool.
Very nice.
I don't see anyone else with their hands up. Oh, Jen, yes.
I can answer. I can add to everything.
Just jump in, yeah. No need to raise your hand. Jump in.
Oh, all right. So on the fall town meeting for October, we do have a boating master plan that we're looking to develop. And so that would try to come up with parking areas, uniform signage, access to water bodies and waterways in town. So hopefully that'll pass. We did get a grant from $10,000, as Bill mentioned, from Taunton River Stewardship Council. So that'll help fund the project too.
Yep. And that's a great thing. Those are the ways that you actually promote access. And a lot of times people don't know what they have. You know, that little bit of heaven you have right underneath your feet. A lot of times people just don't know about it or take it for granted. And again, in a master plan and in these kind of mini offshoot plans, it's a great way to get people to discover Norton, know your town.
And
Grant, I don't know if this is the right spot, but can we add something about archaeological resources?
Absolutely. It's something, I mean, if it's important, it helps define the town, and it's something that you want to preserve. You probably go more into cultural, but, historical and cultural, but if you're hot right now and we might lose you, so put it in. We can always move it around. What you got?
I'm just out of curiosity what you mean by that. I mean, obviously, I understand the Native American people have been here well before we settled in Norton and so forth. Is that all you mean, or is it more than that? I'm just out of curiosity. And I'm not questioning you. I don't understand what it meant. That's all.
Yeah. Working with the Historical Society and the Historical Commission to do a little bit more education, maybe plaques at some of the properties so people know areas that are archaeologically important.
Awesome. A red line going around the town of Norton. Just follow the historical red line, right?
It could be another nature. It could be a hike. You go from place to place.
That would be great. And the city of Taunton, the Old Colony Historical Museum, they actually have walking tours in Taunton that do just that, Michael. They plan out walks, maybe a mile or so, just to get people familiar with the downtown and the culture and the history that actually built the downtown. A lot of the things aren't there, but they'll point out what used to be there, and they have building markers to say what it used to be, where it used to be. So it's kind of cool. You could definitely do the same thing in Norton. Probably be nice to get out in the country and look around like that. So that's a great idea, Jen.
Is the sense that the place to start with that would need to be inventorying those sites and maybe seeing what you all have?
Yeah, I would think so.
is there a head start to that, Jen?
Maybe the Heritage Landscape Inventory that was done, might have been 15, 20 years ago, though.
Yeah.
When we were preparing for this workshop and that cultural inventory exercise, we got a lot of data from the Mass Historic Commission and sort of tried to, there are a lot of points and a lot of information there. We tried to make it easier to understand and provide the main points in the inventory, but we can also go back to that full data set and take a look at opportunities for overlap and connection with regards to your trails planning and things like that. We can definitely do that.
Which is a great way to do it, Grant. There's several towns that have actually taken the historic district information, which, like you said, Norton has a ton of that. And they've actually done trails or walks to connect them sometimes to more rural areas. In the woods, it might have been manufacturing areas by the river where the people in the historic district used to live and then go to work and things like that. And I know Norton has areas like that too, so that'd be a hoot to actually do something like that.
Yeah, Bill, I know in the elementary school, it's so funny, I learned when my kids took the tour from the Historical Society and took the walk through the town, you get excited when you find there's a Paul Revere bell right in the center of our town.
There you go.
And things like that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bill, a gentleman named Dan Doyle has had his hand up for a minute. Dan, are you able to unmute and talk?
Yes, that would be me. I am Dan Doyle. I'm also on the Conservation Commission. But just something that came to mind to add on to what Michael said about the reservoir would be maybe in the future getting some parking down there. Not necessarily the boat launch as well, but also parking for public.
Sounds like a great idea. Water access, again, it opens up a lot of eyes in the community.
And I know the water access master planning work that Jen mentioned will address some of that, but Dan, did you have any specific locations in mind?
Not really, because, there's not a whole ton of, I don't think, like open space or room around the reservoir, but maybe somewhere near like Emma's Pub and Pizza or the Chinese restaurant or anywhere around there might be good for parking because it's less residential.
Okay, good. Very good. So just to pause for just a minute, this is exactly what we're looking for. These types of insights into your thinking and your community. So keep it up. This is perfect.
I'm going to float something out there to you, Jen. Do you have a partnership right now with Fish and Game, Office of Boating and Safety to maintain any areas in town?
Just got it signed.
Hot cha! I remember you and I were talking about it before.
It's just signed, and so they'll be working this year. Fisheries and Game will be working this year on creating the plan at one of the properties and doing whatever permitting or development of the property to create the parking area.
And that is fabulous. And this is something you would definitely want to put in the master plan, because once you're in a partnership agreement with the state, you get people like Doug Cameron who come down, they'll work with the local people to set up and maintain areas in town in exchange for a management agreement with the town, where basically you decide you can't have bonfires, stuff like that. You maintain it, you're responsible, fiscally responsible, physically responsible. But it's a wonderful, wonderful partnership, and they can do engineering, design, permitting, and really take a look at places and give you some sage advice on how best to use them. So congratulations, Jen. That's a real feather for Norton. A lot of towns don't take advantage of that.
It sounds like that reservoir is a pretty active boating area in town. Does it have a boat wash station or anything that kind of focuses on water quality preservation?
Nothing currently.
Is the volume big enough there that might be something to consider down the road?
We would also need the manpower to have somebody watch it.
Are there any other kind of guiding priorities or principles we should be aware of or think about before we move on to the next specific question? Okay.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to my buddy Helen. She's going to take the next question for you.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Give each other a break every other one here. So this question, it's similar to the first in that, we're getting at kind of the priorities in town, but this one's kind of from a slightly different angle of considering some of the landscapes, vistas, particular locations or businesses in Norton that are really important to the town's kind of core identity, like those key kind of scenes that you consider when you think of Norton that you want to maybe preserve into the future, that are really important to the town appearance or to its history. So are there any places like that immediately come to mind, and particularly those that might not currently have any kind of permanent preservation component to them? Right, I see Joe raise his hand. Gotta find you, Joe, here.
I'm here. So I know we talked about it a little bit in the last category, but certainly the reservoir. I talked to a couple of people that wanted us as a town to kind of think more about how we can promote it. Certainly, it is smack dab in the middle there, and often when you're coming into town, you have to go straight through that and see it. But they were talking about how we've got rich wildlife there, and make sure that we can preserve that. There's a discussion about, can we partner with Wheaton in any way to do studies of the wildlife? Maybe there's grant money or something along those lines that can be done. But certainly when you brought this topic up, the reservoir was top of mind for me.
That's great. What are the public access points at the reservoir like? And do you think that it's Are there enough of them? Are they purely kind of visual access points? Like maybe you're looking from a bridge, or do you feel like there's maybe a balance of getting into the water versus being able to look at it? Or
Well, I certainly think there is. I haven't spent any time specifically on the reservoir, and I know there are some places where there is access for boating, whether it be motorized or non-motorized. And we've certainly had some discussions in town about those, and I know that Jen is doing a great job trying to work those things out so that we have additional parking and things like that. It's a little bit tough. I mean, it's certainly along 123 where you get a lot of your access in Reservoir Road, where you get a lot of, sort of sight lines. There's not a lot of space there to, have a pull off or anything like that, at least not without doing some construction. But maybe I'm misinformed. I can't think of any bridges over it. But
Joe, are you on a board or a commission, or are you just a member of the public here?
Member of the public.
Awesome. Thank you very much. These are great. These are great comments.
Yeah. One of the things I think about when I was thinking about the question that Helen asked is things that identify the community. And again, as I say, heart and soul issues. The minute I heard that question, I'm kind of thrown into, like, if I'm in Rehoboth, do I think of a place like Redway Plain, which is a beautiful big field with historic, connotations, the development of the town? Do I think of things like the Church on the Green in Taunton? I grew up in Rhode Island. I used to be fascinated driving by Providence and seeing the Industrial National Bank building, and it's 52 stories, which was enormous when I was a child. Are there things like that in Norton that really define Norton, that really identify Norton? When you come to Norton, what do you think of?
Looks like we have two folks raise their hand. I'm going to give Jen, and then I'll go to, it's just the order on my screen. So, Jen, what's...
Well, Wheaton College is right in the middle, and that is something a lot of people see right away. But I do think of the agricultural fields on Crane Street. It's a very pretty area, and I know, quite a few people do drive down there just to look at the fields every once in a while.
I was a member of a CSA, I think, on Crane Street briefly. Is that
Right.
CSA down there? Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, you were. I know the farmer who runs it.
Michael, I see your hand is up again.
Yeah, it was just kind of really follow up on Joe's point. I mean, I've spent a lot of time on the reservoir. If you're not familiar and you don't ask the questions from locals, and we've gotten better over the last, I've been doing it for about 5-6 years. I've boated, I've kayaked, I actually swim in the reservoir. Don't judge me. People judge me on it. I think it's great. But I think we can do a better job. And it really is where the boat ramps are down on Juniper. And so it's survival of the fittest to try to get onto the water. And you kind of have to hold your breath that sometimes the individuals around there, and you try to be cognizant of the neighbors around there and that you're not invading their space as well. But I think we're doing better with that. And I think some of the things that Jen's working on with the grants on signage and all that is going to help. But what blows me away is the innovative ways the citizens of Norton have found a way to get onto the reservoir is really, really, really interesting. Where I've seen people pull off and get into the reservoir there is no rhyme or reason. And I think that's one of the things that I'm excited to see the master plan for the water has come on board. And it's funny, in the last, I think Jen probably knows more about conservation space than I could probably ever know in 20 more years of living in this town. I'm having trouble really wrestling with that one area where you're like, wow, you think of the annual town outing on the behind at the high school and the fireworks there and just all the events, but I don't really have this real common space besides obviously the common, Wheaton College, our waterways. I'm having trouble thinking of this large field as something that's like, oh, that defines Norton. But I'm one person, so.
I think you're really right in the sense of like those, it's also like the events that happen there, like the fireworks, thinking back to my hometown, it was just the space we went to do that thing, and that's still very meaningful for sure. Yeah. I know we had one other person raise their hand here, I think. Go ahead, Joe.
Yes. So I don't want this to be a conversation between Michael Toole and myself, but something he said, kind of triggered me again with the reservoir, which is we shouldn't need to say, don't judge me for swimming in the reservoir, right? It should be something that, people are proud to access, proud to use. And, we should be doing what we can to make sure that it's usable by everyone. And whether that's dealing with, outside vegetation, like was discussed before or whatever, we shouldn't have to feel bad about using it.
Well said.
I think that comment comes more from Mansfield treatment plant dumping sewage, the effluent into the reservoir. That it's sort of a holdover from that, I think.
Sure, but there are ways to treat that as well. So,
But it doesn't go there anymore.
Yeah, and but one of the things I've asked my units to do is let's make sure we're testing the water and we're making the testing public annually. I think it's very important. We'll go a long way to know that people know that it's safe to access the water for swimming and so forth. So.
Excellent. Yeah, don't feel self-conscious about having overlapping priorities and interests. That's what this is all about. We're trying to find areas of consensus and importance, so don't worry about that. Really?
Well, if we're sticking with the reservoir, I will add one more thing, because I keep thinking about the dam, the reservoir dam. And both sides of that dam are conservation property, and a lot of it has invasive species in it. And I've been thinking for a long time it would be really nice to make a river park there.
Oh, yeah.
So we'd have to figure out the parking, and we'd have to figure out, appropriate fencing near the dam. But it might be a nice place for people to go and be able to look at the reservoir. That goes along with something someone else had mentioned earlier, just being able to look at it.
Do one of the dams fall in Mansfield, Jen? Do those fall in Mansfield? Did one of them fall in Mansfield? I'm thinking on the reservoir side. Or am I totally off base on that?
The dam? No, the dam is only on the Norton side.
Yeah, it's in Norton. That's another great thing too, because the question says, what identifies a community? I think the thing I love here is just you guys are thinking about things that you would like to identify the community, not just the things that already do identify the community, and maybe making the reservoir more prominent through giving a little TLC. And maybe in what you just said, Jen, that to me just screams of like a park master plan for the reservoir, where you take into account everything that you need. You know the issues really well. You've all kind of looked at it and had to deal with it, and now you're saying if we did this, and this would be a showpiece in Norton. This would be something that would identify Norton, because people would want to go there, and people may travel to go there. There's a lot to see in Norton right now. You got a lot of nice little parks, little historic areas, but yeah, you can create areas through your master plan that will identify Norton for years to come. So that's great planning. You got to keep it up.
Miss Peg Dooley, did I see that you wanted to speak?
I do have a hand up. Hello, everyone. It's Peg Dooley, and I'm co-chair of the Historic District Commission. And of course, something that is near and dear to our hearts is the center, which is the Historic District, with the common that has been recently beautifully been refurbished, and fencing replaced, et cetera, landscaping. There are two privately owned, more than that, structures on the common. One of them is the library that's owned by Wheaton, and it's been closed for so many years. And it's a beautiful piece of property that it would be nice if it could be used again. And the First Minister's house, which actually I own, is on the seal of the town of Norton, and it dates from 1710. And it would be wonderful if it wasn't privately owned any longer and owned by the town, which is a horse of another color. But, there are walkable parks. There's a children's park down beyond, across the street from St. Mary's. There's the Trent Memorial Park, which is adjacent to CVS. There are some beautiful homes around the common, which are worthy of being enjoyed and appreciated as you're driving through. That's it. Oh, something else regarding the reservoir. Many, many, many years ago, and someone, Jen, I'm sure would be more aware of this than I, but many years ago, it was probably 30 years ago, Wheaton, in collaboration, in fact, I think it was a Wheaton project period, whether it was the biology or chemistry department, I have no idea, but they did quite a long research project having to do with the reservoir cleaning itself up after sewage had been not dumped in there any longer. And I have no clue. Jenna, are there current water testing going on, or how often in terms of jumping in and eating the fish? That was another problem. There were signs up for many years, do not eat that which you take out of here. A lot of people, of course, chose to continue and use it as food, which I'm sure was probably fine, but I don't know that either. But the historic district is something to be kept in priority.
I don't know of any water quality testing in town. I don't know that any of us have the budget for it. Certainly not at the moment, but we haven't been doing any water quality testing, and I'm not familiar with anything that Wheaton has done. If they did, it wasn't shared with my office.
Again, it was many years ago. It could have been 30 years ago. Is that before your time?
I've been here a while, but it's not been 30 years.
Before your time.
I was blown away by her 20. I think she just had her 20th anniversary.
21.
21.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
Awesome. Are there any events that take place on the town common, or does the space allow for that? Or
I'm sorry, what was that?
Are there any events that happen on the town common, public?
Sharon, if you care to chime in, there are various things through the years. Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny. Prior to that, though, the Cultural Council used to, again, this was maybe 20 years ago, used to use the common for entertainment during the summer, a half a dozen things. And it certainly didn't work out after a period of time. As you can imagine, there's a great deal of commerce going around and in and around the common, and the noise was just ridiculous. But nothing like that has been used, because they're now using the library park for anything like that the Cultural Council puts on. Sharon's going to be doing some wonderful things with the rec department with Halloween decorations because of the situation that we're in. It's never been done before, and she came to us and we said, sure, this year is great.
Yeah, we're going to be having a scarecrow competition contest, and I think we're probably going to move the Halloween festival to the common as well. It's a tough spot. It's a beautiful space, but as Peg mentioned, there is a lot of traffic and a lot of noise. Also, when you've got young children involved, it's a really busy intersection, and the fence is beautiful, but it doesn't do much for containing children. So, but we do use it. We use it for the Festival of Lights in December, and prior to me, I believe they used to do the egg hunt there. We actually moved that to a different park in town, just for that reason, because lots of little kids running around. It's not the right location for that. But I would love to utilize it more, but we have to see what COVID allows us to do moving forward.
For sure. Are there any specific improvements that would, maybe it's just not the right space, like you're saying, for different activities, but is there anything that comes to mind that would make it more functional?
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the question.
Sorry, I wasn't close enough.
I'm just deaf. It's okay.
Is there anything, it sounds like it might have some use limitations for sure, but is there anything that would make it more functional, that would be an improvement that we could, the town could work toward?
Well, the thing that would make it more functional from a Parks and Rec standpoint would actually kind of undermine the historic value of it, because it's really containing containing the kids and making it a safe space for them. And it's really a beautiful spot. And the fence in particular is something that I really appreciate about that, about the common, and it's a nice feature. So I would say from my standpoint, it would kind of undermine the purpose of the space as it's viewed now.
More of a passive recreation space.
Yeah. I think there's, I actually have seen people sitting, there's some new benches and things in there, which are really nice. And I've seen people sit there, just chit-chatting from time to time, which is a nice thing. I can't say that prior to COVID anyway, that I've ever seen anybody just sitting there. There's also a really nice Veterans Memorial there that it was a nice ceremony. The town became a Purple Heart town. So that's a really nice space too there. I think the beauty of it is really the preservation of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
for sure.
The common is also used for, as Sharon was alluding to, Veterans Day and Memorial Day remembrances. The parade would go through there or adjacent to it, etc. But it's actually quite a dangerous intersection in terms of people on foot and crossing over to sit or go through.
I wonder if you could make like maybe there's something about fixing those access points. Like, is there a way to make that park more accessible?
Well, parking would be a problem as well. There's no parking in the area for people unless they went down to CVS and walked through.
Even just to like be able to cross the street to get to it, to a bench there or something like that might be something that. When I was asked, because we did have one comment, or sorry, did someone else want to?
One spot that I just want to point out that I think is totally underutilized that Peg mentioned was that library ground. I'm a justice of the peace, and I've married more people underneath that gazebo. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed is that the gazebo matches up against this big field, which is great for music that I don't think most of the town even realizes is available through the library commission. So
that's actually one of the comments from the chat. Lori, forgive me, I'm probably going to mispronounce your last name. Flesher said, on a different track, I don't know that the library defines Norton, but it is in the heart of Norton also, and it's a place where cultural events are held. And it's gazebo too, cultural events that can help identify a place.
I stole her thunder. I'm going to mute myself now and go.
Great minds think alike.
This stuff is great though. This is the heart and soul stuff in Norton. These are the special things. This is good.
Laura, did you want to speak to that? If not, no problem.
I just was saying to I forgot the gentleman's name there. Great minds think alike, so it's okay. And you did pronounce my name correctly.
Awesome. Good.
I'm actually listening in as a member of the Cultural Council. So
welcome. Thank you.
Are we running out of steam on this question? Should we move on, or are there any other of these types of kind of iconic Norton places?
I'll quickly jump in. The one thing I haven't heard anybody say is all the open space off of Bay Road. In the older days, you used to take the dogs out there and run them, and kids and run them, and sometimes the cornfields were up and sometimes they were all mowed down. Ton of paths back in there, a bunch of foundations back. I don't know if it was somebody else who's been in town longer than me. I think there was a piggery or a turkey farm or something that used to be back there. Another great, I don't know if it clearly is an A to B that it's a landmark, but I do know it's historically significant. Maybe somebody else can chime in on that property.
It sounds like off Toad Island Road. That's Division of Fisheries and Wildlife property, I think.
Sounds right.
The Irwin S. Wilder Management Area.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
You got it. That's it.
Yeah, beautiful spot.
It is beautiful. But it's nice. You're right, Denny. People might not know about it. This is the place to put it out there. Put it in your master plan. Give it some TLC.
Yeah, Copperworks. Nobody knows where that is.
One other big comment in the chat from Lori. I know one landmark I love that was preserved through Norton's Land Preservation Society is King Phillips Cave. So that sounds like another. Does that get frequented a lot, or is it something that could use a little more publicizing?
Well, it's an interesting situation because years ago you could just go in there, but then they built, it was developed for housing. But I guess somehow there was an agreement made that people still could come, because it's preserved land, and so that people could still come in and go into the area where King Phillips Cave is, and there's a marker. But I've had, at least over the years, I'd say a good handful of people who will be riding around the street, because I live right near there, and they'll say, do you know where King Phillips Cave is? Because you can't, I mean, the people who live in the little developed area I don't really want people to know too much about it. So it's a little bit of a tricky thing, but you know, if you can figure it out, then there is a big sign once you get up the road, because there's no sign. I don't know that maybe the agreement doesn't allow that. I don't know, to have a sign right off the road like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be a good thing to look into, though. Like, what is the status of that public access to that site?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're at 7 o'clock. We're about exactly halfway through our time together tonight. Why don't we take the next question?
Let's move on, yeah. It's always a big one. How can the town better meet the recreation needs of its population? And I always say to people when they're answering this, how well do you know your population? What are the needs to be met? In general, we're an aging population. Do we have enough activities in our town, and think of it this way, to serve all of our populations regardless of age or ability? And how accessible are our recreational facilities? Take it away.
Well, the senior center, there is a great need in town for a new senior center, which is in the process of hopefully being voted on as in a location as well, hand in hand with the town hall. But obviously, a new senior center would provide a great wealth of activities for that age group.
Yep.
Something I mentioned in the chat. I'm digressing. Was the Sun Chronicle aware of this Zoom meeting by any chance? Because as few or as many people that do get the Sun Chronicle, they do cover somewhat decently that which goes on in Norton. And obviously this master plan needs a great deal of publicizing.
I'm going to defer to Paul DiGiuseppe here to talk about that. Paul, are you willing to, did we do a press release for this event, or was it just on the town webpage and Facebook?
Yeah, we didn't do a press release. I'm trying to recall when I did individual emails. I don't remember if I emailed Steve from the Sun Chronicle. He has been to these events, so I don't know. He might be on the listserv. But
I know there's also been an advertisement running from the Norton Media Center on cable access and things like that. But I honestly don't know, Ms. Parker, whether we did that. Typically we don't for smaller events like this. But the good news is a recording of it will be available on the project webpage, and we'll also make it available to Norton Media Center should they wish to air it in its entirety. It'd be 2 hours of programming, but all that to say, the event will be available, a recording of it, and we'll certainly invite anybody and everybody to participate via the project webpage. Should people become aware of the event later than they should have, we can extend that rolling web event for another week or two. There's no reason we can't do that.
Grant, I'm sorry, where is the recording to be available? You said 2 sites?
Yeah, we'll make it available from the main project webpage. That's Norton Master. It's serpent.org/Norton-Master-Plan. And we will make sure that it's also made available to the Norton Media Center so that they can air it. And I guess we can also, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to post to the link to the Facebook page. I know there are a good 100 or so followers on that page as well.
All of those things would be a big plus. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking. So this might not fit neatly into better meeting the recreation needs of the population, but that's fine. I see in the chat, Laura Parker said, I'd like to see the town seriously consider the purchase of the 34-acre lot at Zero Reservoir, presently owned by Wheaton, and develop it into a town park and recreation space, such as a boat launch, biking, walking paths, hiking, nature trails, picnic areas, etc. And she gave us the parcel ID number. And Jen says wonderful. So Jen's hand is up. There's my segue to Jen.
I'm going to forget what I was going to say.
Well,
I think when COVID's, the pandemic started and people were staying home, a lot more people were getting outside to neighborhood parks, and it would be great to have a park or and a way for people to recreate within walking distance of their house, not just something that they have to drive to. So more neighborhood parks.
Yeah, so in the planning for this workshop, we had considered doing, Helen, I'm going to put you on the spot if that's okay. We had considered doing kind of an analysis of the areas in town that aren't within walking distance of public parks and recreation spaces. And we could certainly do that as part of the master plan. We didn't do it for this workshop, but is that something that would be of interest to you, kind of identifying those areas in town that could be better served by walkable neighborhood parks?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Helen, did I describe that okay?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you take the sidewalk network basically and little centroid in the park, and then see what's within a certain, usually like a quarter mile or half mile distance for their sidewalk network, and then kind of see what falls outside of that. Definitely very doable.
Yeah, we'll be sure to add that as part of the master planning analysis for this element of the master plan.
Yeah, Helen's right. That's a standard exercise. That's the way they do it, usually for open space plans. And one of the other things there too is that it helps to meet the environmental equity needs of a community, and that's just it is what it says. You have equal access to all the facilities in town to the best of the ability of the town from your neighborhood. And it could be recreational fields, ball fields, pocket parks. I know when we were doing the open space plan, Jen, a lot of people wanted passive recreation. They wanted more trails, biking, walking, hiking, nature areas for nature photography, things like that. So I think that's kind of reflective of the population they have right now, the age of the population too, and takes a lot of the things that you're talking about into account.
Joe, you have your hand up.
Yes. So I wanted to piggyback on a couple things. So, Peg mentioned the senior center, but in your earlier comment, you had mentioned how we handle, recreational activities for people of all ages. And I know there's discussion about whether that senior center should be just a senior center or a community center or what. But, there's probably no reason we need to limit it to just being a senior center and having it be multi-use, during different parts of the day may be helpful to various populations or various portions of the population at different times.
Okay.
Do you think the number of facilities in town is adequate right now? I haven't heard anybody say anything about the number of facilities, because that's reflective of opportunity.
I think it's very lacking. I think I think we get very creative with the spaces we have, but I don't think there's a defined area, and I think we lack the number of spaces of parks within the town where people go. It's funny because when Laura had mentioned and I'm sorry, I just started talking. I raised my hand, but Laura mentioned that space that Wheaton owns. I think there's actually even a better space the town already owns that abuts the reservoir, and it's right across. It's land behind the apartments over at the TPC. There's a stretch of land there that the town already owns. I don't know how much could be developed, but I mean it's right off of 140 over near across from the TPC behind the apartments there. It's already been drawn out as a cul-de-sac area. So I think that's the area that I would personally think that would be a nice, if you could turn that into a park that would be sitting on the reservoir that the town already owns and doesn't need to make the investment into buying the property, then to redevelop it.
Okay, that's North and South Shore Drive. Is it Paper Street? Yeah, it's conservation property that they were planning to use as a staging area for the reservoir dredging project, and that never went forward. And so it's yeah, it is right behind the apartments. Yeah, a little bit of wetland there.
A little bit. But and I know that it's probably not going to be a building that's going to go there. It would take an act of, it would be very creative engineering to find an upland circle on any of that land.
Joe.
Yes, so I tend to agree with Michael that, I don't think we have enough, but I think the other challenge is making the community aware of what we do have. This is partially my fault, but as we started talking about this, I jumped on Google Maps and I'm sort of scrolling around and discovered 3 or 4 places that I didn't know existed. It's if there was a way that we could get that to be a little bit more publicly known, that would be great. And maybe that's just a page on the town website or a special recreation website that kind of has that list on it. That would be useful.
Well, and I also know, Jen, I'll put you on the spot if it's okay. I know that the Open Space and Recreation Plan recommends more visible and consistent signage throughout the town. That might be another strategy for us to consider to solve that problem of knowing where places are and their level of access and who owns what. Am I welcome here? Can I walk my dog? You want to talk a little bit about that, Jen?
As long as you pick up the poop, you can walk your dog, yes. And take it with you. Don't leave it on the property.
I don't have a dog, so.
You had a raised hand from Catherine.
Yeah, hi. My name is Catherine Hedden, and I'm the chair of the Norton Cultural Council. And I just wanted to enthusiastically second whoever just said the awareness part, because I know I've lived in Norton for 6 years, and I would have to say about 90% of the places that you guys just described, I had no idea even existed. And I also, in the same bucket, am now in a position where I can be part of the solution. And interestingly enough, tomorrow, October 1st, is the first day of our grant cycle at the Norton Cultural Council. So if anybody here listening is interested in applying for a grant to be able to help publicize all of the wonderful things that you guys are working on, then absolutely, definitely, please make an application.
Wow. That's great, Catherine. And one of the things, we've worked with cultural councils before, and it did come up during the open space plan, like Jen was saying, Grant referred to, that we sent out a public survey, and a lot of people were saying, what we need is consistent wayfinding signage. And I thought it was really funny when Jen and I went to make the presentation before the Board of Selectmen, we were mentioning places. Remember, one of the guys said, I've been living in town 41 years, and I've been driving by that place every day, and I didn't know I could go in there. So
we do have, a small pamphlet of trail maps on the Conservation Commission's website. But we have a lot of information there, and it's, I think, easily lost.
There are some really, really nice apps these days, that people can have for their phone. Like I know New Bedford, for example, like uploads some of their trail areas, something like that. So that might be a cool platform to consider.
Yep, definitely get creative with it. What else? How about athletic fields, things like that?
Yeah, I was going to ask that, because I think there was a comment in the first question, right, about youth league facilities.
I know for youth sports, and I know that the high school is actually working on an expansion onto their fields and improvements onto their fields as part of our capital improvement plan. Basically making a field turf, the football field turf around the track. And but again, the youth sports, we know that soccer works behind the middle school, or actually does behind they have a great facility over there, but it's very wet. Softball kind of struggles, and then we have Birchall, which has actually gotten better since they've improved the drainage. But I know that the youth sports programs have really struggled for many years trying to find adequate practice space, game space within the town. Yeah, I never even said it. I'm Michael Toole. I'm part of the select board, by the way.
All right. Hey, Dan Doyle, you just flashed something great. You want to speak about that, the Trail app?
Yeah, sure. So the All Trails is an app I've been using. I'm a pretty avid hiker, but yeah, all Trails, and it has quite a few properties in Norton, like the Time Forest, Johnson property. There's quite a few. They're not exact, but they do give you an idea, and you can kind of figure out where to go and where the different trails are leading you. And there's also the one off of, I think it's Newland Street, has some maps too.
Nice. So if you had a good app with some good signage, boy, you'd be hitting a home run.
QR code, you'd be great.
Yeah, yeah.
The LPS website, the Land Preservation Society, also for me has been a tremendous resource for maps, especially for a lot of the LPS properties. It's been a tremendous resource for all sorts of PDFs you can pull down.
Yeah, which is another thing. The partners that you have in town that do a great job, this is a great place to acknowledge them, talk about the value of the partnerships and how they should be perpetuated going into the future, because it's going to be partnerships that help make things like this work. They really get the master plan's legs.
Absolutely. Are there any other thoughts on how the town can better meet recreation needs of people of all ages and abilities in your community?
I got one question. Maybe
Hold on, I got one.
Oh, I was going to say.
Go ahead, Bill.
How about ADA compliance?
That's where I was going.
I thought you might. I don't have to poke you. You're all over this. All right.
Well, we're hoping to get eventually a really good ADA compliant trail system at Edith Reed.
That would be a great start.
Okay.
All right. I guess we'll turn it over to Helen for the next one.
Sure thing. Very similar to the previous one, but switching gears from recreation to what cultural opportunities or amenities could the town provide more of, and I would definitely include things like events or different types of activities, for whether it's anything like Bill was saying, from targeted activities for children, but then if there's a growing senior population, are there specifically some activities that we'd want to gear towards seniors? Like, what are those kind of cultural places and happenings that you want to see more of?
Me.
Pick it up.
I would love to see some murals and some more sculpture.
Yes.
I think it would be great to see, in the middle of town. It'd be great to see on some of our conservation property, and we're working with the Cultural Council now on one of their grants. But I think there's a great opportunity to make some things really pretty.
That's awesome. Remember that came up in the open space plan too, Jen. We were looking for functional public art. Art that you can use as benches, seats, the whole bit. And there's examples of it around southeastern Massachusetts. I think I pulled up Westport as an example. I sent some photos, the open space committee. So that's great. That's great.
Are there, let's see, Lori Plesher says, you might know, but the Regional New England ADA Center is a great free resource on ADA creating accessibility. That's awesome to know, yeah.
Dan.
So I was thinking maybe like finding somewhere to hold weekly or bi-weekly concerts, like under the gazebo or a field or a park or something. Kind of like I think Foxborough does it, and I know the town I grew up in, Dedham, does it at the Endicott Estate. But yeah, something for music.
Yeah, that'd be nice, for sure. Are there some ideas for specific locations where either this kind of mural activity or music activity could take place, or is it kind of more conceptual at this point?
Well, the master plan, when we take all of your input and combine it with the planning documentation from the open space and rec plan and everything we heard about at the workshop in person in March, we can try to identify overlapping areas. So for example, one of those open spaces that we didn't know we necessarily had access to or was even there, that could be one of those key locations for a public art or for sculpture. That kind of the two birds with one stone idea of we make you aware of the art, brands it as a location, tells you a little bit more about its purpose or its history. So we can sort of look for things like that.
I think Paul, do you have your hands up?
Yeah, I actually have a question for the public. There's one group of people that oftentimes gets overlooked when it comes to providing cultural amenities, and that's teenagers. So the question I would like to throw out is, what opportunities do you see for teenagers in the town?
Well, we on Facebook feed there was someone who wanted to try to put together and then this maybe falls more within the park side, but a skate park, or how do we get a skate park going in Norton and so forth for those young teenage kids and so forth. That's just obviously one idea, but it's a good question because I don't know where teenagers gather in town. I wouldn't be able to really tell you, besides going to other friends' houses.
Would there be like a method for trying to engage them on this issue specifically? Like, are there any relationships with, I don't know, the schools in town or ways that we might go about that?
We certainly can as staff to reach out to the school board or to the superintendent. Because I would really love to hear from, when obviously I'm very thankful for the people who are here, but obviously there's a lot of groups that aren't represented tonight, and we should certainly be considering and in fact, your questions are great because that's what we're trying to capture is, all abilities, all people. But we could certainly work with the schools to try to identify what those needs are.
We did in Taunton, Paul, many years ago, Taunton and actually in Attleboro, back in the Stone Age when I was young as like some of you are now, We actually held special events
Mhm.
for the kids to come out, right, K to 12, to come out and participate in a master planning exercise. And the Riverwalk and the skate park in Attleboro, they helped design. We had a special session just for them that adults excluded. And it was wonderful. We held it in the library, and we did the same thing in Taunton when
Yeah.
we were designing the stormwater park and things behind the Taunton City Hall. And they had some great ideas. I mean, they do some great research, and a lot of the things like that, I mean, you hit it right on the head. For them, that is a cultural spot as much as it is a park and a recreational area. It's where they get together, they talk, they chat. Other things you might want to look at is even gallery space for youth art. You know, something like that.
Yeah, I love it. And you know, as we continue on, it's our hope that we will, you know, as far as planning goes, that we'll continue to do different public engagement. I've done in other cities the same thing. We've actually gone into schools, had a teacher that made time for us to go in and do a planning exercise, and it was actually some really innovative ideas.
Yep.
And we should do it again with, obviously we have limited resources, but if we're able to go to other demographic groups, you know, we should continue to do so. And that's something we're going to try to do.
And that's the best thing about the master planning process. It doesn't say, you know, where is it? Why isn't it happening? It's just saying, we're looking at it and we realize we need it. And that can be as much as a part of the master plan as policy, to go out and engage the groups that you feel, you know, get somewhat neglected.
Right. So the master plan doesn't end with, you know, an endorsement at town meeting or by the planning board.
That's right.
It's just the beginning of a process that will also give us, a lot of us, different responsibilities, different tasks that we need to do. And maybe this is one of them, is to continue to work with partners to do outreach with the community, particularly those that don't come to meetings, even Zoom meetings. You know, we should, I would hope that we would prioritize that.
That's awesome.
I see a comment from Dan in the chat I was going to read. He says, I love the idea of a skate park or something like a multi-use pump track for skateboards, bikes, and scooters. Dan, would you like to share more, or does that cover it?
Sure, that basically covers it, but just for people that don't know what a pump track is or whatever, it's like just a series of hills, maybe in like an oval shape, or it can zigzag or whatever, but something that bikes could use, rollerblades, or anything. It's just basically a bunch of series of little bumps and hills. A lot of fun, and kind of anybody could use it, whereas a half pipe, only certain things with wheels can use it. If that makes sense.
May I put either Jen or Sharon on the spot and ask you guys if you know about grant programs, capital improvement funding programs for things like that we should be aware of?
The park grant is good for active recreation projects.
Yeah.
Paul, is that the one that you sent out information about last week?
Last week, no. It's usually announced in the spring, and then it's due in June or July. It's a fairly large grant, and it would actually help pay for like a town park for a lot of the ideas other people are bringing up. Public space like that.
So let me ask the question, if these individuals were interested in that, would they just approach, who would they approach in the town?
Interested in the idea or the grant?
Or to try to interested in trying to move the grant forward?
You need money for the appraisal, and the appraisals have to be done very specifically to Executive Office of Environmental Affairs requirements. It's the same process that we have to do for a conservation property. But yeah, if you identify the property, have a willing landowner, and you have an appraisal, then we can get that grant rolling.
Okay. Great, I will pass the information on.
Yeah.
How about like cultural events that might be good opportunities for kind of public-private partnerships? Like I can think of things like a Taste of wherever, or, are there ways to engage with kind of the commercial districts in town around cultural events?
I could just, again, I'm trying not to speak a whole lot because as the planning director, I'd much rather hear from everybody. That's been a challenge. This is a great opportunity, but particularly when COVID struck, we really didn't have the resource or the ability to reach out to these businesses, and that's something that's still on my mind, that we need to, we use some resources, but we need a much more cohesive approach to reaching out to our local businesses for a number of reasons, but one of which, Helen, is that point that where can we partner on events? Where could we partner even on, cost sharing? To engage them to help provide more public benefits to the community. So that's something we're going to continue to look at very closely and help figure out how to, get a list of our active businesses in town and get contact information for them.
Is there, that's great, because I think that also helps to sometimes organizing those events helps to foster those and deepen those relationships, and it's an exciting component for sure. Anything else on this particular question? Or I know we have the climate change one coming up, which I want to make sure we get to for sure. All right, hearing none, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Bill.
All right. Climate change, yeah, we went through this with your MVP plan, obviously, and I have to say that in the open space plan in your community, you probably have the most extensive climate change section that I've ever seen in an open space plan. And when we updated it, we just added more material to it, but it's great. So if you haven't read it, go there and read your MVP plan too, because this question is really germane to the things that you just put out there through your MVP plan. You say, when thinking about changing climate or climate disruption or however you think about it, what do you think are the biggest threats to Norton? We ask those questions, and this is really important. What places or communities might be most vulnerable to climate change? And then how can the town help to protect those places and those vulnerable populations or areas? And Norton's experienced everything. You've had the last few years, you've had microbursts, you've had drought, you've had ice storms, you've had, everything but locusts and toads. But, so you've really experienced it firsthand. So what comes to mind when you think about this? And it's all about resiliency. People always say,
Bill, 2020 isn't over yet. So I just want to point that out. 2020 is not over yet, so don't even talk about it.
I'll just hope the locusts don't come in. So, but something like this, it screams resiliency. And a lot of people say it's community's ability to bounce back. Yeah, it is. It's like getting knocked down to the campus and standing up. It's also, and fits right in with the master plan, the community's ability to bounce forward. How can we grow and how can we proceed from here and how can we become more resilient and more responsive as a community? So take it away. Oh, silence. Don't tell me this. This is not a hopeless situation, people.
One place that sometimes we can start is, what have you noticed in the past few years? Whether it's heat effects or what's kind of been affecting you in relation to this change.
Some of you who took part in the MVP plan can restate some of the things you said there. That would be a great start.
Paul, go ahead, jump in.
Well, just today with the wind gusts, tree damage, we're a town of trees. It's wonderful, but when we get get strong storms, we're dealing with a lot of downed trees. Impacts. It's hit property. It's hit power lines. It's a serious problem.
Yeah, I don't think our infrastructures matches our infrastructure of utilities don't match the intensity of the storms that have been coming. All right, is that probably the best way to say it? I mean, we have a lack of substations. We have a lack of, we depend on lines in town. And obviously when we get hit hard, the whole town feels it all at once. It's not one person. So, all of our lines tend to be are above ground. Utility lines are above ground. So that's really not I'm losing the theme of the question, but obviously it's on my mind.
No, it's perfectly good.
And so managing forests and trees with, forestry plans and, arborists to take a look at which trees are actually hazards to the infrastructure that you brought up. That's something that we should probably look more into.
Yeah.
Flooding.
Flooding,
everyone's favorite. Norton is 40% wetland and water bodies and waterways, so we can have some flooding at times.
Yep, and I know you're looking at infrastructure fixes. You're looking at Leonard Street now as part of that regional. And then Walker Street's always hanging out there, and NOAA and Nature Serve still have that out there on the national funding list, so hopefully something will come of that. How about vulnerable populations? People who live in these areas. This came up during the MVP talks too. There are certain populations that are more vulnerable, more susceptible. Public transit has to serve their needs. Think about access and egress from the areas that people may be trapped by flood or storm event. What about that kind of thing?
You could mention that town hall and the fire station, they're all within the inundation zone for Norton Reservoir. And so that's a zone that our engineering company has designated that if there were some sort of an issue with the dam broke, that's where the water would go. So if we're concerned about flooding, then we probably have to talk about being in the inundation zone.
Yep.
We weren't supposed to say that above a whisper, Jen.
How about heating, cooling, and sheltering for vulnerable populations? Do you have adequate facilities? Where are your emergency centers right now?
I know
Schools.
the schools are current. I know that COVID was actually a minor test for feeding our population. They didn't really necessarily do the acid test on housing. But yeah, the emergency plan, they do have an emergency plan, but our schools are it.
Do you think your facilities are adequate? I mean, I know somebody said before a senior center. A lot of times senior centers provide shelter for vulnerable populations too during storm events, droughts, heat.
I can almost say with confidence that our infrastructure is lacking in many different areas. I don't think I'm in danger of putting myself out there by saying that.
So I would add, with climate change, we expect more drought and more above 90-degree days. And the amount of people still using the water supply or even private wells to water lawns instead of saving it for drinking water is something that we should probably take a little closer look at. And in the same vein, yeah, I don't know about you, but when I go to the farm stand or the supermarket, the costs have gone up quite a bit. So I would look at local farming, like small farms, and our food supply, trying to keep that local as well.
That's a great point. No, that'll help you. If you have active local farming, it'll help you hold the topsoil, and that'll help you with carbon storage too. So, what else?
Go ahead, Dan.
Hi. So just to add on to what Jennifer said, I'm not sure if it really fits with this question, but I would love to see Norton do a, I don't think they have on a farmer's market, or yeah, farmer's market, like weekly or bi-weekly next year maybe. And that's all.
Jen, I'm going to drop another one on you. How about the hazard mitigation plan? You think it's time we actually jumped in the saddle on that one?
So the fire chief is working on drafting the RFQ for the multi-hazard mitigation plan, and that will open up a whole other host of grants for us.
Yeah. Yep.
Is there a sense that kind of folks in town are aware of kind of some of the best local projections for what's anticipated to happen in the region? You know, so yeah, Resilient MA, the state level kind of database, has watershed scale predictions into the future. Is there any kind of public education campaign around climate that might be necessary?
I would say it's probably necessary. The only thing I've really seen is the little bit we have in the open space plan, and I don't know how many people actually read that. But having more tips and tricks for how people can have an impact themselves, and that's a more cumulative impact, I think would be helpful. If everybody does a little bit, we'll be a lot further along.
Yeah, the site that Helen was referring to too, resilientmass.org, resilientma.org. They have climate data by the watershed. You can look at things that are going to impact your city or town, a geographic region. So it's great. If you're a data geek, it's the place to go. And there are a lot of resources there too that you can pull off and maybe create informational things or distribute amongst the boards. That's what we went to that to get a lot of the data for your MVP plan.
So we have about 15 minutes left. Are there any further thoughts on climate change, climate resilience, ways to prepare, things we should explore? So hearing none, before we go on to this last question, I don't know if we've had an opportunity since March to really talk about what a master plan, what this is going to look like. And I know it's available in the frequently asked questions, what the plan structure will probably be. But I thought I would take a minute just to say that what we try to do tonight is find those key areas of overlapping importance, right? Those high priority goals that are very clear in town. And for each of those goals, just like your open space and recreation plan does, the master plan will identify implementation strategies, actions to take to make those goals real. And for each of those strategies, whether, Michael, like you asked, whether it's a grant program that we should participate in, or whether it's looking to create a more clear inventory of those historic places in town, we will identify, we'll describe it first, and then we'll identify who's in charge, responsible parties. And that could range from the Concom to the planning board to town administrator to volunteers. And then for each of those strategies, we'll talk a little bit more about performance measures. How are we going to measure success? What are our steps? When are the deadlines? How are we going to move forward? We'll also provide you with example success stories. So I think it was Dan maybe mentioned an example of one of those pump tracks in a community, or an event in his hometown. We'll look for similar success stories from across the Commonwealth or across the country, and try and provide just a really easy how-to, like if this town can do it, then Norton can do it. We also try to provide complementary actions. That's what I was trying to say earlier when I'm saying that there are often overlapping strategies that accomplish more than one thing, and we'll try to highlight those for you. So all of this is just to say, we've covered a lot of ground tonight, and I can't guarantee that all of it is going to make it into the master plan, but those key ideas, those really important areas of consensus and action items certainly will. And I just thought I'd take a second to let you know that all of this content will be analyzed and approached from that perspective, trying to get it a clear how to think of it as an instruction manual or a recipe to make all of these things real. So with that, this is sort of more of a visioning or a touchy-feely exercise here. We really are just trying to give you an opportunity to describe your hopes and aspirations for town. And this is the third of 3 activity on the master plan workshop webpage. So we were hoping you might just take a minute to help us fill in the blank, and let's just take this first one. So 20 years from now, Norton will still feel like home because it stayed blank, blank, and blank. And if you can let us inside how you might complete this phrase, we might better understand, those heart and soul issues and heart and soul characteristics for Norton. So would anybody like to take a crack at that, or would you prefer to do it on your own time on the webpage? "20 years from now, Norton will still feel like home to me because it stayed a small town, because my community group is still active, because we still have tons of open space available to us," things like that. We thought this one might be more might be difficult.
Well, I don't actually live in town, but if it stayed for shady street, you could walk down.
Yeah.
First term that came to my head was, make it walkable. Sidewalks, parks. There are a lot of nooks and crannies in town that nobody knows about. I think the small pool of people that we have here, the brain trust, so to speak, obviously we're fans of the project. We're enthusiastic about the town. That's why we're on the call. I think we probably, if you're looking for a more broader scope and more valuable input, I think a broader pool of input, by putting out some sort of a survey or telegraphing, a little bit more about what the project's all about, that might be helpful. I think one of the biggest shortcomings of the center of town is that it's not walkable all that much.
Okay. Thank you. Would anyone else like to take a crack at either this or the next question? the next question is 20 years from now, Norton will be a better place to live because it will be more, and I think I'm hearing more walkable, more, more connected, continue to be more forested. These are sort of similar ideas, but the first one was trying to identify what makes Norton feel like home to you now. And then the second question is really trying to, identify those hopes and aspirations you might have for the way the community might change in the future. Okay.
This looks like it's shaping up to be a think at home after a snack exercise.
I think so. We thought this might be.
Yeah.
I wanted to at least introduce it because I'm hopeful that you guys will take some time and that the folks that aren't here tonight, like you just mentioned, that this webpage is circulated and that we do get that wide variety of comments from different groups. Well, I'll put this, I'll leave it more open-ended. Would anyone like to address any of these questions? If not, I think we can probably call it a night. I'll give you a quick summary of where we're headed next.
What you got, Paul? Paul, actually, you came on. What you got?
Yeah, I for number 2, I'm not a town resident, and this is more of a general statement, but for the town to be more, in the future, it just became a more accepting, inclusive community. Meaning that everyone should feel welcome. And it's already a good place, but every place could get more accepting.
Sure.
Paul, what's going on that I don't know about?
I'm not going there, Peg.
Well, I'll talk to you, I guess, another time. Oh, dear.
I was going to ask if any residents, Ms. Dooley, since you're speaking, do any residents agree with that? Is that a goal for Norton as a place moving forward?
I think that's a goal for the world. I honestly don't see anything off-putting in Norton, but yet I don't know. I don't know. My children are not in the school system. Way beyond that, I do not know what you're perhaps alluding to, but I think the general in the world is a good one. That's for sure.
Great. Well, so why don't we leave it like this? We'll let everyone complete this exercise if they want on their own time and at their own pace. And the idea is really just to capture those. I don't think Paul was being corrective. I think it was more aspirational. So we're trying to capture those aspirations for town, and if being in a more inclusive and accepting community is one of them, then hopefully we'll hear it. So just to summarize really quickly, what we'll do, this is the third of, it'll be 4 official events to gather this type of public input for the master plan. There will be a 4th event sometime likely in the late winter or early spring, and that will address transportation and circulation and services and facilities. We've covered a lot of that already with the March workshop and with this one. So we'll probably, I'll work with Paul and others to identify exactly what shape that workshop will take. I assume it will probably take place virtually, just like this one. But if some miracle happens and the pandemic allows us to meet in person, we'll certainly try and do that. Let's see, there's a comment I might have ignored. Let me finish this summary and then we'll go back to that. Just so you know, I think this goes back to your question, Ms. Dooley. This video will be online, and we will create a quick summary of what we heard from this workshop and make it available both on the project webpage, on the Facebook page, and we'll work with the Norton Media Center to get that out there too. Apart from that, just please stay tuned to the webpage and Facebook, and we'll make sure all of that is up and and any other updates that I'm not thinking of right now are made available to you and to the public. Before we sign off, Heather made a comment. Heather McKibben. I've lived here 23 years and know that this is my forever home. I don't have kids, just dogs, but 3 acres on the reservoir. Love spending time every night watching the sunset on the reservoir and kayaking. I love all my neighbors and love this beautiful little town. So that's wonderful. That's a great way to sign off. And that's
You should say so.
that's really
That's
what
not
we're
aspirational. I don't know what is.
Yeah, exactly.
That should be a quote in the plan. That should be on page 1.
Nice going, Heather.
So Heather, thank you so much for that. And if you as a longtime resident, if you can forward that exercise around and hopefully capture a little bit more of that sentiment and that poetry, that'd be great.
And just as a resident of Norton, I want to thank all you guys at Serpent for doing all the heavy lifting, because I know this isn't a small job. I've been kind of watching from a distance and had limited involvement with the rail trail, but Bill and I have known each other for a long time, and the knowledge, the enthusiasm, especially the science, which I'm a big fan of. You guys have done a great job, and as a resident of Norton, a great big thank you.
It's our job and our pleasure for sure.
Big fan of what you guys are doing.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.